Hey, today we'll be looking at the Enhancement Shaman Tree for Dragonflight. I'm going to try to go over this as quickly as I can, and then I'm going to put a link down below that goes right to the Enhancement Theory Crafting. So if you want to just jump to that, you can jump to that. Otherwise, I'm going to be going over every talent and the entire trees as a whole. So for the base tree, you're going to want to take Flurry, which will increase your attack speed. Nature's Fury, which increases your critical strike chance. Improved Lightning Bolt, which increases your damage dealt by Lightning Bolt by 20%. Fire and Ice increases all fire and frost damage you deal by 3%. And Frost Shock. There is also a weird thing I have in mind where maybe you take Nature's Swiftness with Lava Burst. That way you can get a rip of free stack of that. That's possible. And I think this is just a generic semi-dungeon, semi-raid build. This one increases your max health by 10%. This one is a generic shield that we're already running to put on yourself. This allows you to replace the location of a totem. Normally I wouldn't go it, but it builds into the shield. It heals you when you drop below 35% of your health for 20% of your health. This increases the radius of your totems, which is really good for Wind Fury. This reduces physical damage that is going out. Thunderstorm is a knockback, and if you couple it with Thunder Shock, now instead of a knockback, it knocks the targets up, which is good for CCing ads. Nature's Swiftness allows an instant cast of any spell that's on the list. This reduces all damage you take by 3%. Wind Rush Totem for movement speed for your team. Leech by 3% and avoidance. Capacitor Totem for CC. Wind Shear is the best interrupt in the game, so you're going to want to take that. Astral Shift to reduce 40% damage. It's a 2-minute cooldown. However, this lets you buff it to 60% damage reduction. Increase your health by 50% if you need it. Increases the healing you receive by 20%. It's good if you ever have to off heal yourself real quick, and you don't always have to run all these talents. For example, like let's say you didn't need Capacitor Totem, then you can spec over down here into Spirit Walk, which allows you to move 60% faster for 8 seconds, and it's a 1-minute cooldown, and I think that's pretty useful. Essentially, you can play around with this tree all you want. There's a lot of utility. There's physical reduction, increasing the radius of your totems, damage increases, and just small buffs everywhere. My only problem with the tree is that I think there are too many 2-point talents, and I wish a lot more were one. That way you can grab more utility, because there's a lot you're not grabbing in the tree, and that kind of feels bad. It kind of makes you be like, how, but it's also good because it's like, all right, what's more impactful? So in some situations, you definitely sacrifice some things over others. Do you really need Earth Shield? Probably not. Let's go into every other ability and when you might use it. They have Chain Heal, they have Earth Shield they can put on somebody, Healing Stream Totem. They also have this OP conduit in the tree where your next 3 healing surges are going to be really strong once you place this totem. Ancestral Guidance for the next 10 seconds, 25% of your damage and healing is going to also be mimicked on the people around you. And if you couple this side, utilizing this totem with this ability over here, which resets the cooldown of your most recently used totem, you can get a second use of Healing Stream Totem, and that's pretty big for a healing burst as an off spec. On top of this, now you also have Mana Totem. Whenever you do damage with Storm Strike, you can give your healer some mana back. Now let's look into all the other talents that I haven't talked about. Capacitor Totem is a stun. This increases the Capacitor Totem, reduces the cooldown by 5 for each target hit up to a maximum of 20, so it can be a 40-second cooldown. Guardian's Cudgel, probably better for PvP, but essentially when the totem disappears or gets destroyed, it mimics it and drops another totem, which is good for an overlap of CC. Tremor Totem, if there's any fears, charms, sleep effects. Thunderous Paws and Spirit Wolf is good for movement speed and getting out of stuff. Cleanse Spirit, it removes a curse from a friendly target. Hex, if you need to stop something from casting. Flame Shock reduces the mana cost to your next heal by 10%, increases the healing effectiveness by 15%. Also good for the healing tree. Buffs your Hex, either reduces its cooldown by 10 seconds or the target becomes slowed, probably a PvP talent. This removes a beneficial magic effect from an enemy, and it'll either remove up to 2 or it can give you a stack of Maelstrom if you go into this. Increases your ghost speed, reduces the cooldown of Spirit Walk or Gust of Wind. All the elements is, like I was saying before, it lets you recast an old totem. This reduces the cooldown of Call the Elements by a minute, or it lets you affect 2 totems. Can remove a poison effect from a party member. Systemic Surge, it reduces your cooldown on your totems by 2 seconds. It's a 2-point talent, so it's a total of 4 if you play a lot for your totems. Now, there's a lot of utility. There's a lot of different things you can build in this tree. I think it was structured really nicely. I think there are just a little bit too many 2-point talents that make it hard to maneuver through the tree, but do you need them all? No. So you don't need everything. The only thing you need is the 5 talents I listed, probably Flurry, Nature's Fury, Frost Shock, a Fire and Ice, and Improved Lightning Bolt for damage. Everything else is survivability. Everything else is utility. And when it comes to dungeons, this is probably the generic dungeon build I'd go. You got your CC, you got an extra form of CC with Thunderstorm and Thundershock. You got reducing physical damage. You got your interrupt. You got movement speed. Now let's look into the Enhancement Shaman Tree. These are going to be the base talents you're going to be taking almost 90% of the time. You'll be taking this talent all the way up. You're going to be taking this talent all the way up. And with Wind Fury Weapon. And the reason for it is this increases your damage by 10%. Primal Lava Actuators, each time Flame Shock deals periodic damage, increases the damage of your next Lava Lash by 12 seconds and reduces the cooldown of Lava Lash by 0.5 seconds. So the more time your Flame Shock is taken, the more damage your Lava Lash is going to do. Or Primal Primer, melee attacks with Flame Tongue active increase the damage the target takes from your next Lava Lash by 35, stacking up to 10 times. So the more you're autoing something, the more your Lava Lash is going to do. I think they're both relatively the same, so we're going to have to play with both of these to see which one is better. Single target. I know Primal Lava Actuators is probably better for AoE, but we'll see. This one reduces the cooldown of Lava Lash by 3 seconds, and when you have Flame Shock on a target, it'll spread it up to 4 nearby enemies. This is Lava Lash itself, which is an attack with your offhand. And Storm Strike is an attack with both of your weapons, and which is very important for later on in the build. Use your main hand to allow your main hand to attack a second time. Increases your Maelstrom damage. Increases your Maelstrom stacks by 5 additional points. And that's it. That's why you take them. They're nice general buffs. Reminder, this is Storm Strike, this is Lava Lash. These are going to be your 2 main spells you're going to use. And let's get into the rest of the tree. Let's talk a bit about the Wind Fury side because it's very unique. This entire side is essentially buffing your melees. This increases your Wind Fury damage by 35% every time it's repeated. Whenever you get that Wind Fury proc, you're going to increase your Wind Fury damage. Now, this gives you a chance to repeat that auto attack 3 times instead of just 2. And this increases your odds of hitting Wind Fury up to 75%. And you also increase the damage of Wind Fury weapon by 25%. I think that's I think going down this side of the tree is a pretty nice 1-minute cooldown. Because it buffs your auto attacks, nothing too much. All you have to do is press Doom Winds and your auto attacks are going to be pumping. Elemental Blast, mostly used for a single target. What it's used for is just a straight rip of Maelstrom, either that 5 stack with the other thing or a 10 stack to give you a nice burst of damage. Over Sundering, it's an AoE ability. Not much for single target. Just slams the ground doing spell damage and encapping the enemy for 2 seconds. Wind Fury Totem buffs yourself in the raid, giving everyone a 10% chance to attack an extra time with their main hand. Hot Hands, you know, the thing everyone loves whenever you have that proc. Lava Lash is going to be hitting 100% harder with a reduced cooldown. His talent's probably more or less for PvP. And I want to talk briefly about this part right here. I think Fire Nova will be best for mass AoE for the fact that it's just one button you have to worry about. However, there is a chance that Hailstorm plus Ice Strike is going to make your Frost Shocks really, really strong. This one grants you 2 stacks of Maelstrom when you use Ice Strike or Fire Nova. So there's a chance that this build path could be really useful. Crash Lightning, it electrocutes enemies, causing your Storm Strike and Lava Lash to become AoE abilities. Each target hit by Crash Lightning increases your Storm Strike damage by 5%. So if you hit like 10 targets, that's 50% increased damage on your next Storm Strike. So if you're doing mass AoE, Gathering Storms is really nice. Each target hit by Chain Lightning reduces the Crash Lightning. So these 3 Really good for mass AoE. Now I want to talk about Storm Strike. There are a lot of things that buff it. Remember, that's this spell. Go down here. Storm Strike has a 25% chance to strike again. It's like Wind Fury, but it's for 40% of the damage. Nothing crazy, but it's extra damage because you're going to be pressing Storm Strike a lot. Then you come over here. Special attacks have a 5% chance to reset the remaining cooldown on Storm Strike. Okay, so now there's a chance to get a Storm Strike refreshment. 5%, nothing big. However, whenever you do get the proc, now Storm Strike's going to do an extra 25% damage. Okay, 25% damage increases Storm Strike. Then you come down here. Storm Strike now generates 1 stack of Maelstrom and its base damage is increased by 8%. This is the best thing you can get for Storm Strike. Main form of generating Maelstrom. And then you come over here, consuming 5 stacks of Maelstrom will reset the cooldown of Storm Strike and cause it to do 15% increased damage. Another big spell. All of these abilities work with Storm Strike and buffing it. So if you're running a Storm Strike build, you're going to want to probably grab all of these abilities. Feral Spirits, you summon some wolves to come help you. They generate a total of 6 Maelstrom when summoned. Witch Bonus Doctors, it reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirits every time you get Maelstrom. It increases the chance of getting it by 4%. Elemental Wolves is for probably a single target. It reduces the cooldown of Feral Spirits by 30 seconds, and on top of that, it enhances their abilities. Alpha Wolf makes, whenever you crash lightning, it makes your wolves AoE, so you're like a hunter, BM hunter now. Ascendance is a 3-minute cooldown. When activated, you do 250% attack power. On top of that, it reduces the cooldown of Storm Strike by 66% and allows your Storm Strike to bypass armor. Now, when your Ascendance is activated, you're going to be generating Maelstrom every 1 second, up to a total of 2. And when you come down here, if you're generating so much Maelstrom that you can't even keep track of, then at 5 stacks of Maelstrom, it'll automatically launch a lightning bolt, so you don't have to press lightning bolt in this burst window. The way Primordial Wave works is you apply Flame Shock, and then whenever this goes for one target or multiple targets, any target that has Flame Shock on them after you casted Primordial Wave, when you cast a lightning bolt, you will rip all the targets that have Flame Shock on them with a lightning bolt. This is really good for mass AoE. When you cast Primordial Wave, it generates 10 stacks of Maelstrom, which is a lot every 45 seconds. And on top of that, which is really good for AoE versus single target, is that for each target hit with Lightning Bolt, you get 6% haste. For single target, I think this is going to be the most generic build. You have buffs to your Storm Strike, you have Ascendance, you'll have your Feral Spirits. You have Elemental Blast, you have Doom Winds for your auto damage, you have the Lava Lash procs. I think in general this is the best. There's also a theory I've been working on that maybe going 2 stacks into Primal Maelstrom is better, for the fact that maybe you don't want that big burst of Ascendance Maelstrom and you want it spread out over 45 seconds. And if that's the case, then you can take this. I did the math and the numbers. In 3 minutes, this right side will generate you 30. And the left side, this will generate you 40 Maelstrom in 3 minutes. So this will generate more Maelstrom, but this generates it in 15 seconds. So it's just like, do I want it all up front or do I just want to spread it out? It's all up to you. We have to see what the charts tell us. There is also another play that I've seen people building, and that's instead of taking Doom Winds, they might take Hailstorm with Ice Strike and Swirling Maelstrom. That's also a possibility for single target. There's also a chance maybe Sundering, or maybe like you take a point off of this, you go put a point here, or you put a point here. There's a lot of small changes that can be done, but in general, these talents that I currently have the points in, I don't think you'd want to remove. The only thing you'd play with is maybe full maxing this side of the tree, to go over here, putting a point in here, putting a point in here, getting rid of Doom Winds, and maybe going over here, maybe putting an extra point in Sundering. Other than that, I don't think there's too much to play around with. Primal Lava Actual is Primal Primer, you can mess with that a little bit. Overflowing versus Focus, you can mess around for single target as well. I think Focus will end up being better, because if you full stack into Ascendance build anyway, you're going to be ripping Lightning Bolts, so you're not going to get to the 10 stack, so there's no point in that. So mostly it's going to be a lot of playtesting to see what ends up being the best. And the reason why I'm so curious and I went back and forth a lot in this build is for the fact of Doom Winds. I don't know how impactful of a ability that's going to be. And if it is impactful, then you'll end up running it. If not, then it'll end up being a dead tree where you'll just never go it. But I'd like to think that it's going to be impactful. It's a 1 minute cooldown. It's a little bit extra thing to press, so I think it's going to be good. Now let's look into AOE. This could end up being your best AOE, but this is when the theory crafting comes really into play here. Like I said, you'd want to take this all the way up, as well as primal lava actuators all the way up. And each spell in its own has its own idea of, will this be more useful? Will that be more useful? And the answer is, I have no clue. So Doom Winds. Is Doom Winds good for a dungeon scenario? I'm not sure. I remember shamans who popped Doom Wind always did good damage. Or maybe you want to spec 1 point into Ascendance for AoE. You could also end up doing that. But going back, Doom Winds is definitely a talent you'd have to play with. And where you would make those points up in the tree. You could put 2 points over here. You can put a point into Wind Fury, put into Storm Flurry, put points into Hailstorm, into Ice Strike. So these 3 points aren't necessarily needed, but it could be useful. I think Sundering will definitely be useful for AoE. I think it does a lot of damage when there's a lot of targets, and it's a nice 40-second cooldown. So this is the generic AoE build I put together myself. You have Ascendance, you have Feral Spirits, you have your Alpha Wolf to attack nearby enemies, you have your haste buff from Primordial Wave when targets are affected. You have Fire Nova, you have Crash Lightning, you have your Storm Strike damage increase when you hit a Crash Lightning on multiple targets, you have Sundering for AoE damage, and you have Doom Winds for whatever reason. Is Doom Winds going to be OP? I don't know. I just like to make this build just to throw it out there. But going forward, I'm going to remove Doom Winds, and I'm going to be playing as if you're not going to be building it for AoE. What you would do with those 3 points if you didn't want to go Doom Winds, you can get Chain Lightning, which reduces the cast of Crash Lightning. Wind Fury Totem if you have a lot of melee. Storm Flurry. There's also a possibility of maybe you don't need Storm Flurry and Wind Fury. And if that's the case, you could go Hailstorm, Ice Strike into Swirling Maelstrom to give you a stack of Maelstrom to increase your Frost Shock damage, and your Frost Shocks are going to be ripping on the targets. There's also something else I'd like to mention, like maybe Legacy of the Frost Witch isn't good. Not that it isn't good to run, but maybe you want that like a little bit extra 3 minute burst, so you can just run Ascendance just cause, you know, I think a 3 minute button just to press would end up being better in the long run than just a 1 point talent, but something to play with and find out. Same thing for the other one, like maybe Alpha Wolf isn't that good, and you don't have to go into Alpha Wolf. Then you can put that, so now you're generating a little bit more Maelstrom every time you enter Ascendance to give it a little bit more bang. Maybe Swirling Maelstrom isn't the way, and then you go Fire Nova, and you want to go Stormbringer again and bring that route up. And then this is the same build path. Maybe your dogs suck for. And this could be also an off-meta dungeon build. Who knows? I don't know. I'm just making random stuff up at this point. Because you got your Ascendance, you got your Primordial Wave, you got a dog, you got Elemental Assault. But do dogs really even do that much damage? You know, hold on. Let's just do that instead. Maybe your dogs suck, so maybe you go this route, and instead of having this as a cooldown, you just have a 3 minute Ripper. This could end up being really good. Yeah, actually, I'll take that back. You wouldn't want to go Thorns if you do that. And then you can probably just get Wolves on top of that if you really want to. There's a lot you can play around with. Will Doom Winds be OP? Who knows? I think it's going to be more impactful than going Hailstorm. Plus, it saves you a button to press. It's a 1 minute cooldown on top of a 3 minute cooldown on top of a 1.5 minute cooldown. And especially if you couple that with Primordial Wave, which is a 45-second cooldown. This gives Shaman a lot of cooldowns to press preemptively for boss fight to make them really strong, and or even dungeon. For AoE, you're probably going to be spamming Crash Gathering Storm with Fire Nova Sundering. Alpha Wolf is going to be really good because every time you get Crash Lightning, it makes them auto-attack other targets. On top of that, Witchbones is reducing the cooldown of this. So it's going to be really useful for big target cleaves where you're going to essentially turn into a BM hunter. So that's why I think it's better than Ascendance unless you want to be more of a boss killer. then you could end up turning, like I said, you could take 1 point off and going to Ascendance just to give you an extra 3-minute burst of a cooldown. Other than that, yeah, there's a lot to play around with, a lot to mess with when it comes out. Other build paths that could end up being more OP than the ones I've shown, but I think I've covered everything in other possible scenarios where you can just, take 1 point off this, put it here, for example, a point off here, put it there. There's like a lot of 1 point changes you can do in the tree that will have a very big impact and it'll be fun to play around with. I hope you enjoy the tree and what I was talking about for the last couple minutes. I think Shaman is going to end up being this tree is really, really well designed. I think Shamans are going to be very strong in the next patch in Dragonflight, and I hope to see you all there. You have, your Wind Fury over here, your Lava Lash stuff over here, you have your Crash Lightning stuff right here, you have some more Storm Strike over here, but you're going to be building into it regardless. Storm Strike stuff you can build into it both ways. Your spirits, your ascendants, your primordial wave, everything flows really nice into each other, and I really like the pattern of the tree. It's just going to be figuring out which talents are going to be your best to run together. And that's what we wait for. We're waiting for the synergy and the charts, so it'll be fun to play around with. I'll definitely be messing around with it a lot. And if I ever find a build that's better than what anyone else is building, then I'll make another guide. But until then, happy hunting. You are now a BM hunter for AOE, and I hope to see you in Dragonflight. Have a wonderful day. No. If you enjoyed this video, like, comment, subscribe. If you have any ideas of another build that I didn't mention, or if I said something wrong, please comment down below so other people will know, so I can make a edit or comment about it. But yeah, thank you for watching. See ya.